Hello! As usual, this year's family conference was getting bogged down. Everyone had decided to cool their heads for a moment, and a short break had been agreed upon. The four siblings could say whatever they wanted, but Natsui and Kyrie, for example, were outsiders and found it difficult to speak freely in this sort of atmosphere. I don't remember if it's Kyrie or Kyrie. Sometimes. A conference where you aren't allowed to say what you want can be tiring even as you just sit there quietly. Even Kyrie couldn't help letting out a deep sigh. This was the second floor hallway of the mansion. Rudolf had wanted to be alone during the break, so she had felt like doing the same, and had drifted up the stairs to reach this place. Kyrie's expression was less tightly controlled than when her husband was around. She wore a tired look that she didn't often show. She pressed her cheek against the cool window glass. I need to regain my spirit and support my husband, even if I'm not allowed to speak. That's the duty I've won. She suddenly sensed another person, turned around to look behind her, and saw Jessica standing at the other end of the hallway.
Jessica ちゃんじゃない。ゲストハウスに行ったんじゃなかったの？
ちょっと本を取りに自分の部屋へ戻ってたんです。
そう。ゲストハウスに戻るところ？
はい。そうです。
嫌な雨ね。風はだいぶ強いのかしら。
今は比較的弱いみたいです。
As Kyrie looked out the window, Jessica watched her back, looking agitated.
キリエおばさん、ごめんよ。運がなかったと思ってくれ。
ゼトル、ジェシカの運命のルーレットはキリエを選んでしまったわ。
どうするんだいジェシカ。ルーレットはキリエを選んだけど、それを拒否して再びルーレットを回すのも君の勝手さ。試練に捧げるのは誰の命でも問わないのだから。
Jessica wasn't like George. George had willingly chosen Eva to be his sacrifice, to signify his separation from his old wife so that he could step into a new life married to Shannon. However, Jessica hadn't thought of any particular target, so she had left it up to the roulette of fate. That was no exaggeration. She had walked around at random, imposing a rule on herself that the first person she met would be chosen as her sacrifice. And so, the roulette of fate had brought her to Kyrie. Of course, there was nothing forcing her to keep to that rule. However, Jessica didn't want to break a rule she had once made. Even though she was participating in a demon's game, she still wanted to cling to this one last virtue. Right now, she could attack that unprotected back, but Jessica still wasn't able to fully resolve herself.
どうしたの？何か私に話でも？
Noticing the strange distance Jessica was standing at, Kyrie turned around. That unprotected back was already gone. Jessica realized that her hesitation had made her lose her own first chance. She had taken on this demon's game to prove her love for Canon. However, would it really be okay to sell her soul to demons? For the sake of love? She had energetically consented to this demon's game, not wanting to let George, who had already taken an open-minded view of the situation, get any more of a lead on her. But her heart still wasn't ready.
キリエおばさんにこんな質問まずいかな。
何？ジェシカちゃんが私に質問なんて珍しいわね。答えられるものだといいんだけれど。
実は私好きな人がいるんです。
あら、そうなの？それは素敵ね。まさか恋の相談なの？
そんなところです。
いいわよ。私でよければ力になるわ。
りがとうございます。実はそれで
まだ片思いなの？
いえ、そこから両思いになりたてって感じのとこです。ただ結ばれるには試練があって。
試練？何それ？
私たちともう一組の恋人たちがいて、争わなくちゃならないんです。
三角関係？それとも四角関係？複雑そうね。それで？
勝った方の恋人同士しか結ばれない、そういう複雑なことになってるんです。つまり
嫌な話ね。相手を踏み台にしてしかどちらも成就できない恋なのね。
はい、自分たちが結ばれれば相手が破綻します。そして逆もしかりです。
質問の趣旨が大体分かったわ。こういうことでしょ。人は幸せになるためにどこまで他者を踏み台にすることが許されるのかでしょ。
Yes, Kyrie was very smart. She had already guessed the question that Jessica had wanted to ask Mose.
戦わなければ自動的に相手が勝ってジェシカちゃんたちは負けになる。しかし戦って勝てば相手を破綻させることになる。どちらも嫌な話ね。でも聞くまでもなく答えは決まっているわ。
はい。
Kyrie giggled. If she wasn't willing to stick to her love until the end, then that would show the limits of their relationship. If that were the case, she should just let the other pair of lovers win. However, if this was a love she couldn't abandon her chances at victory either. So, she had no options other than to fight. In the end, Jessica's hesitation was caused by guilt over forcing the other to split apart as the result of her inevitable decision.
やっぱり私は甘えているでしょうか。
そうね、甘えてるわ。
でも自分たちが結ばれるために誰かを踏み台にするなんて、そんなの辛いです。
じゃあジェシカちゃんは恋のお相手を諦める？
それは
断言するわ。その方が辛いわよ。地獄を這うことになる。生涯ね。
A hardness had entered Kyrie's gaze.
私は6歳だったから当時は何もわからなかったけれど、遺品の中にお母さんの手記があったわ。
それは日記のようなものか？
どちらかというと随想録ね。日記よりももっとアバウトなものよ。亡くなってすぐにそれを見つけて読んだけど、その意味を理解できるようになるには長い時間と私の成長を待たなければならなかったわ。
なるほど。キリエの夫婦仲についての悩みが記されていたというのか。
あれは完全にお母さんの呪い帳よね。その中身は6歳の私がずっと漠然と感じていた疑問を次々に表解させてくれたわ。
When I was 6, it seemed as though my parents were very close and had no problems. And though I thought it odd that Oni-chan lived separately, even though he was in our family, I accepted it as the way things were.
アスムのことは知らなかったのか？
お兄ちゃんが誰もいない時に話してくれたような気がするけど、小学校前の私にそれが理解できるはずがない。だって 写真すらない相手よ。お母さんはアスムさんの写った写真の全てをお兄ちゃんに送って家の中には一切残さなかったそうだから。
To Angie and to Battler, who only rarely came home, Carrie's smile never faltered. If she hadn't written her thoughts in that notebook, Angie would probably never have known them. Since his school days, Rudolf had been particularly popular with girls. Girls. Yes, a typical playboy. Be bold, over the top, yet still just a little bit gentle towards women. He probably kept that formula for being popular with women inside his head. In their attempts to win Rudolph's favor, several women tried various seductive tricks. Rudolf probably enjoyed that part the most. Since the beginning, love had been a game to Rudolf. He never thought of it as a trial and error process to find a single life partner. He would intentionally spark jealousy between women, lap up their compliments, and revel in the harem. You may be my father, but he was an awful man.
でもお父さんも同時に媚びへつらう女の子たちをきっと見下してもいたのね。そんな中に自分の価値観をしっかりと持ち知性を見せるお母さんは目立って見えた。
それすらもルドルフの目を引きたいキリエの知恵かもしれぬわな。
かもね。お母さんはいろいろな意味で頭が良かったから。
Like the other Ashirimiya siblings, Rudolf had strong ambitions and lofty goals, under the mottos of, if you can pull it off, you're golden, and as long as no one finds out. He would alternate between setting up businesses that were borderline swindles were illegal, then running away. I've heard that in his college years, he was already making use of that talent, thinking up shameless projects and cleverly making money through the panic selling of party tickets, so much so that he could brag about carrying a wallet full of 10,000 yen notes all the time. Many women fell for his charisma in being the man responsible for these radical projects, as well as his thick wallet and generosity. It would be a lie to say that Kyrie wasn't one of them. However, what made Kyrie very different from the other women was that she could support Rudolf as a business partner. Rudolf would make a large-scale party successful. Unable to hide his laughter at his massive huge profit, the women would surround him. Among them, only Kyrie was calm and composed. She could point out several ways that income and expenditure could be improved upon, and could even lay out a proposal for the next project.
そうしてルドルフにパートナーとして次第に認められていくわけであるか。
男子厨房に入るべからずっていうように女もまた財布に入るべからずって空気はあるわよね。女はおごられて当たり前。男の出す1万円札をどうやって捻出しているかは野暮だから聞かない、知らない、興味もない。
キリエは金に対する価値観が男性的であったということだ。
Rudolf noticed a true treasure in this part of Kyrie. He knew exactly how much hard work it took to get just one of those 10,000 yen notes. So, somewhere inside him, he had looked down upon those extravagant women who never even considered the efforts he had undertaken. Of all of them, only Kyrie had possessed the same sharp financial intuition as Rudolf. Every time he thought of a new plan, he would talk to Kyrie about it, work out the kinks, and make it succeed. In this way, Kyrie steadily worked her way up until she was the number one of Rudolph's large group of followers.
でもお母さんだって女。他の女たちにチヤホヤされてるお父さんを見て心が安らいでたかどうかは疑わしい。
ナンバーワンよりオンリーワンの方が良いというのに。
そういうこと。お母さんはお父さんの右腕として活躍しながらもその陰では狡猾に他の女性を切り離していったわ。お母さんの恋の成就はもはや時間の問題だった。
アスムはいつからいたのか。ルドルフさんの取り巻きの一人。いえ、取り巻いてさえいなかったわ。ただのファンの一人だったわ。
話したことはあるんですか？
もちろん。私は彼女のことをよく知ってるわ。ルドルフさんがアスムさんの名前さえ知らなかった一番最初からね。あの子もきっと頭のいい子だったの。狡猾だったわ。私は頭の良さで目立とうとしたけど、彼女は全くその逆で目立とうとしたの。
頭の悪さで？
肥後欲のかきたて方がうまいって意味よ。こびてイチャついてくる女たちの中で、彼女の仕草の一つ一つが派手な女たちに触傷を起こしていたルドルフさんには目立って見えたのよ。
Kyrie still acknowledges the mistake she made in letting Asumu and Rudolf get too close. Kyrie had thought that taking the role of Rudolph's business partner meant she would have him all to herself. That might have been due to her pride, and it might have been her arrogance, as she tried to eliminate the relationships between all the other girls and Rudolf. Perhaps she sometimes tried too hard as a business partner, putting too much pressure on him, regardless of the fact that it was justified. Bit by bit, Rudolf had started to need a woman who could stay quiet and soothe him, without making him think about anything complicated. That woman was Asumu.
私は冷酷で知的、合理的で経済的、カルネアデスの船板のような状況があったら躊躇なく相手を蹴落とすわ。そんなパートナーがあの人にはふさわしいと思っていたから。
Plank of carniades. However, that ruthlessness had made her reliable on the business side of things, it might have disturbed Rudolf deeply outside of business. At some point, though Rudolf still acknowledged Kyrie's skill, he began to yearn for a quiet, warm acceptance. Asumu had satisfied all of those conditions. She would never talk about anything complicated. Even if he did, she would just shake her head to say she didn't know. However, she would care more for him physically than anyone else, quietly putting a blanket on him and staying by his side until morning.
確かに私はビジネスのパートナーの座を手に入れた。しかしいつしかルドルフさんには心を癒してくれるメンタルのパートナーが必要になっていた。私は愚かしくも知的を自称しながらそれに気づけずにいたわ。
それでルドルフおじさんはアスムおばさんと結婚を？
ええ、そうよ。取られた。たくさんの女をはべらしていたもの。今さらどこの女と遊んだって情を移すような人じゃない。それにあの人にとって女なんて遊びでしかなかったもの。だからこそ私は体以外を武器に自分の存在を示していた。慢心だな、女として。
間もなく2人は解任するわ。アスムさんはそれをすぐにお父さんに打ち明けたけど、お母さんは逆だった。
身重になることがビジネスパートナーの座を揺るがすことになりかねないと恐れたのだな。
当時のお母さんは食が細くて体調不良とか当たり前だったみたいだから、解任に気づくのも随分遅れた。
気づいたのは
アスムさんとお父さんが電撃入籍をしてからよ。お母さんはその後に妊娠を知ってアスムさんやお父さんを揺さぶろうと随分暗躍したみたいだけど。
アスムさん、あんなにぼんやりしてそうなのにルドルフさんを加え込んだら話はしない。だから何ですか、どうぞお引き取りくださいですって。バス一つ乗るにも怖い怖いと縮こまってたあの小娘がね。あの時悟ったわ。 本当に狡猾だったのは彼女だったってね。そうよ、乗り物恐怖症だってルドルフさんの気を引くための嘘だった。ごめんなさい。こんな話を聞いてもつまらないわよね。
いえ。
せめて私の産む子だけでも認知させたかったわ。ルドルフさんもそのつもりはあったみたい。病院もきっちり手配してくれたし、アスムさんの出産が近づいても海外しく私のところにも来てくれてたっけ。もはや向こうが本当の奥さんなのにね。ひどい人だわ、本当。
Yikes. After that, there's a tale I can't bear even to tell. Both Asumu and I had the same delivery date. And yet, her pregnancy had met her marriage, where mine was completely meaningless. I swore to bring up my child well and have Rudolf-san acknowledge it. The fight between Asumu-san and me ended with my loss. However, I wasn't down for the count. If I could make my child excel far more than Asumu-san's, if I could make it fully acknowledged by Rudolf-san, I would be rewarded. That's what I believed.
しかしキリエの子は死産だった。
ええ、アスムさんにはお兄ちゃんが生まれた。しかしお母さんからは誰も。お母さんのせめて第二夫人の座に残りたいという最後の希望は絶たれた。
Kyrie had fallen from being his partner to being his second wife, and then, unable to give birth to the bond of a child, she tumbled down to being merely his mistress. I can't imagine how much she must have hated Asumu and that kid, Battler.
そんなのをお首にも出さず、お母さんはお兄ちゃんとも親しげに接してたわ。ショックだった。あの優しいお母さんがお兄ちゃんにそんな負の感情を持っていて、それを隠しおおせてたなんて。
憎かったであろうな、バトラーが。
でしょうね。もし死産がアスムさんで、お母さんの方がお兄ちゃんを出産していたなら、何か歴史は変わっていたかもしれない。もしもそうだったなら、アスムさんと離婚させて自分と再婚するようなシナリオを描きたいと思ってたみたい。
それも随想録にか。
ええ、だからこそそれは随想、妄想、涙で濡らしたシーツの端を噛みながらのお母さんの怨嗟。
後悔は一点だけ。
解任ですか？
違う違う、私のおごりだけよ。ルドルフさんはもう私のものだから絶対安全。あんなアスムなんていう小娘に負けるわけがない。彼女がバスや飛行機でギャーギャーわめくとき、私はその手配と経費を適正に処理できた。だから私は一番ルドルフさんに信頼されているとおごり高ぶっていた。恋って育むって言うでしょ。
はい。
間違ってないわ。二人で水をやり世話をして育み、そして最後に結実するのが愛という実なの。知ってる？結実して終わりじゃないのよ。愛を収穫しなきゃ恋は成就したことにならないの。
収穫って？
それはジェシカちゃんが考えなさい。実らせても収穫しなきゃ傷んで腐ることもある。 虫がたかることだってもちろんあるわ。いいえ、それどころか盗人が現れてもぎ取っていってしまうことさえもね。ジェシカちゃんたち若い子の恋愛観は育むところで終わってる。それは甘いわ。愛を収穫しなきゃ恋は報われない。
愛を収穫。
それは一見愛し合う二人きりだけの問題に見えて、そんなことはないのよ。だからいつ収穫しても自由なんていう先延ばしは盗人に機会を与えるだけ。苦労して育てた実が翌朝にもぎ取られてなくなっていたわ。昨日のうちに面倒くさがらずに収穫しておけばよかったと後悔するはずよ。辛いわよ、その地獄を這う。私その地獄が18年で終わったから。だからもう私は自分を間違えない。あの人は私のものよ。もう逃がさない、手放さない。そして主に感謝する。その機会を与えてくれた。絶対にあの人を諦めないという絶対の意志に奇跡が応えてくれたんだわ。
By now, Jessica was speechless and didn't even urge Kyrie to continue. This true form of love that Kyrie was telling her about was far, far more harsh than anything she had imagined.
今の私はルドルフさんを私のところにつなぎ止めるためなら何でもするわ。そしてルドルフさんの敵には一切容赦しない。あの人が望むならば私は人殺しさえも躊躇しないかもしれない。18年目にしてようやくその決意を持ったからこそ、絶対の意志が奇跡を私にもたらしてくれたんだわ。奇跡はね、それを自ら成し遂げられる者のところにしか現れる。
Asuma's death had not been a murder of any sort. However, Kyrie had constantly cursed her and hoped for her death. And finally, on the 18th year, she had built up the determination to kill her with her own hands. And she actually had gotten herself a blade to do the deed with. That was when the miracle had occurred.
アスムおばさんが亡くなったことが奇跡。
違うわ。そんなの全然奇跡じゃない。だって彼女が死ななければ私が殺していたもの。つまり彼女は必ず死ぬ運命だった。奇跡なのは彼女が死んだにもかかわらず私が自らの手を汚さずに済んだ。この一点に尽きるのよ。
Until now, Kyrie had never shown Jessica. No, she had never even shown Rudolf. That glint in the deepest depths of her eyes. It told plainly and clearly that romance and love are not the sweet and fluffy candies that young girls imagine them to be. Jessica was overwhelmed by that pressure and stunned silent, and she had to acknowledge it. This was the power of will that could make love be realized. With the force of this willpower, Kyrie had supported Rudolf as a wife, and it was the same as George's. He had already developed and proven that he had the willpower to oppose all obstacles to love between different classes. Right now, Jessica could clearly understand. This was the magnitude of George's determination, which had allowed him to coldly carry out his part of the trial. Then, what about her? Did she really have the resolve to make her love what cannot bear fruit, and to then harvest that fruit?
ごめんなさい。軽いアドバイスのつもりが怖がらせすぎちゃったかしら。この天気のせいね。軽く凄むだけのつもりだったのに加減を間違えちゃったわ。
Kyrie let a relaxed smile rise to her face. The tense atmosphere finally slackened. However, her words had been gouged into Jessica's heart.
ジェシカちゃんの恋がどんなものかはわからないけれど、ライバルがいてお互いが譲れない状況ならばなおのこと、のんびりなんかしてられない。じゃないと私みたいになっちゃうわよ。女は恋のために人生で一度殺意を持つべきよ。世界中で母を名乗る全ての女がそうだったと断言できるわ。だってそうじゃない女は他の女に食い殺されて生涯を嫉妬と後悔の地獄で這い続けるのだから。私はその地獄に18年いた。私は幸運よ。たった18年で恩赦になれた。あの地獄には今も大勢の女たちがいて死ぬまで出られないの。後悔する自分を自らの手で処刑しない限りね。
なんていうか、
Huh.
言葉もないです。
エールを送るつもりだったのに、私ったら脅しすぎたわ。本当にごめんなさい。恋愛なんてもっともっと気楽でいいのよ。
Man, Kyrie is a more interesting character than I thought.
恋愛なんて
Whoa.
本当に
I liked her, but jeez.
誰でも簡単に気軽に遊べちゃう。そして間違えて大やけどした時、その傷が生涯残るんだけどね。
Regrets from love never fade. That was all that Kyrie had been trying to communicate. It wasn't like Kyrie to start telling stories from her past, stories you would normally expect her to avoid, instead of giving a brief answer. However, Kyrie might have thought Jessica deserved to hear. Jessica timidly brought up the subject of love. Perhaps Kyrie had opened up and told everything because she had seen the fires of Jessica's determination in her eyes.
じゃあ私はそろそろ戻るわね。今の話、私たちだけの内緒よ。
With a mysterious smile on her face, Kyrie turned around.
脅しすぎちゃったかしら。でも脅されて知る地獄の方が100倍いい。そこに落ちた時はもう手遅れなのだから。頑張ってね、ジェシカちゃん。ややこしそうな恋だけど負けないでね。たまには人生の先輩らしく振る舞えたかしら。ん？何？ジェシカちゃん。
Huh. A windstorm grazed Kyrie's head. It had been a hair's breadth away. If Kyrie hadn't twisted her body slightly, that fist would probably be buried in her face by now. A bitter smile rose to Jessica's face when she saw that her first strike had failed to land a kill.
言っとくけど、卑怯者だから不意打ちをしたわけじゃねえんだぜ。
Oh, her eyes. Whoa.
わけのわからないうちに一撃で、痛みさえ理解できないうちに終わらせようとしたのに。
言ったでしょ、嫉妬の地獄で生きてきたって。刺されそうになったことの2度や3度あるんだから。わかるのよ、不意打ちの直前の雰囲気が。
気配で分かったとでも。
What's with her eyes?
それプラス一番最初の嘘かしら。
嘘？
Whoa.
だってゲストハウスから来てジェシカちゃんの部屋で本を取って帰ろうとしたら、ここでこの向きでは出会わないもの。あなたがその嘘をつく必要性についてチェス盤理論で想定した7つのケースの中で最悪のものがこれだったわ。
Telling a hasty lie to Kyrie would only put her on guard. On her guard. If Jessica hadn't told that lie, her surprise attack would have succeeded.
やるね。さすがキリエおばさんだぜ。
どうしてあなたは最初から私を殺すつもりだった
誰でもよかった。
最悪だわ。
キリエおばさんの話のおかげで吹っ切れた。感謝するぜ。
Kyrie dodged the punch, placed her hand against that fist, and slammed it against the wall. Normally, Jessica would have hurt her hand on the wall and rolled around clutching at it in pain. However, Jessica's fist had left what it looked like a meter-wide crater in the wall. Instead of wearing a look of anguish, Jessica clicked her tongue in irritation of having missed.
すごいわね。さすがクラウス兄さんの子だわ。ボクシングでも始めたの？
Impossible. Jessica is barehanded. She isn't holding any sort of weapon at all.
抵抗しないで、おばさん。頭一発。痛みなんか感じさせない。
Kyrie tried to look confident, but she couldn't hide her confusion at this unreal destructive force. If that punch had hit, her head would probably have split open like Jessica had said, killing her without any pain.
行くぜ。
If Kyrie's kick off the ground and backward leap had been an instant slower, her gut would probably have been pulverized. Though she had avoided it by a hair, Jessica's left body blow was followed by a terrible burst of wind, like an explosion, which blew Kyrie back.
これは夢？私寝ぼけてる。わけがわからない。
This Jessica looked like the normal Jessica, but something was different. It wasn't human, and common sense didn't apply to it. This had to be some kind of nightmare. Kyrie slowly stood up. Then she looked at Jessica, noticed the several meters between them, and realized just how far that blast of wind had sent her flying.
恨んでくれていいぜ。でも私もキリエおばさんの
No, Kyrie.
いけない。私も自分の恋中途半端には終わらせられねえんだ。
あなたは何を言ってるの？誰か教えて！
The scene around Jessica seemed to bend like a heat wave. It seemed to be enshrouding her fists, and it seemed as though something like a red magic circle had appeared beneath her feet. It looked just like a western demon standing amidst the flames of hell.
重量不意、鉄鋼不意。
Each time Jessica muttered, her fists were surrounded by a pulsating, sinister red light. Those fists, which were actually smoking, surely represented the iron hammers of hell wielded by demons.
さよなら。これは悪夢なのよ。
Kyrie dashed away with lightning speed. Yes, right now, that was her best option. Fortunately, she was smart enough to realize that pinching her cheek wasn't the best way to wake up from this nightmare.
No.
When Jessica muttered once more, a blood-red magical barrier cut across the corridor. Kyrie slammed into it hard and realized that her path of escape had been cut off.
やめてよ、こんなわけのわかんないの。これは悪夢だわ。悪夢なのよ。覚めて、早く。
ああ、悪夢だぜ。それが望みならすぐに覚めさせてやるよ。一撃さ。動かないで。
Wielding her flames, Jessica slowly stepped forward towards her. Each time her foot lifted off the floor, a scorching steam hung around her footprint. This was a true nightmare. Kyrie clutched her head in her hands, shaking it over and over again.
悪夢なのね。これは悪夢なのね。お願い、そうだと言って。
ああ、悪夢だぜ。
悪夢なのね。悪夢なのね。
私が認めてやるぜ。これが悪夢さ。
認めるわ。これは悪夢だと認める。だから
冷ましてやるぜ、一撃でな。
Jessica's neck was twisted at an odd angle, and she staggered backwards, her eyes white, as though she didn't have a clue what had just happened. Wow. In her forehead, a demon stake was buried at an angle. It pulled itself out of her, spun around, then became Leviathan and landed. The hole left behind in Jessica's head spewed blood.
人のレビアここに
悪夢の中だっていうなら、私の悪夢に出てくる友人がいてもいいわよね。
Huh?
嫉妬の地獄の友人よ。危機一髪だったわ。ありがとう。
Oh.
感謝は早いわ。こいつ耐えてる。
Okay. Even though she had taken a deep gouge to the top of the head, Jessica just stood there, convulsing and wide-eyed, and didn't fall over. The blood stopped pouring out of her forehead, and her blank, dull eyes returned. Then she slowly pressed her own hand against the wound in her forehead. There was a sizzle, as though she had pressed a hot iron against it. It was easy to tell that she was doing this to seal up the wound. If Kyrie didn't escape now, there would never be another chance.
あいつを倒せる。
無理ね。あいつ大悪魔の誰かと契約してるわ。不死身よ。
それは愛ゆえに、だから不死身なのさ。
はあ、愛よ偉大なる。我らの祝福する者に不死身あれ。
この赤い魔法の壁は破れる。
ロノエ様も大悪魔。私じゃ無理よ。
窓から逃げられる。
窓もとっくにロノエ様の結界で塞がれてるわ。
すごいわね。恋のために悪魔の魂を売ったわけかしら。
よくもあんな大悪魔たちとこんなにも契約が。妬ましい。
装甲不要、全属性防御、攻撃反応装甲不要。
In response to these words, this time her entire body pulsated with a red light. She had upgraded herself with a defensive power that would prevent Leviathan's attacks from working again.
あいつ何を。
自己増強よ。エンチャントっていうの。今のあいつは私に二度と貫かせない防御力を持ち、その上攻撃者にダメージ反射する力まで持ってる。もう人間じゃないわ。化け物よ。
なんだ。さっきと大して変わってないわね。
そうとも言う。
最初の時点から勝ち目がないことに何の変化もないわ。
痛かった。でも効かない。
Jessica slowly lifted the hand that had been covering her forehead, and there was no longer any hole there. The hall was cut off by barriers on both sides, and even the windows were sealed. There was no way out.
そこの部屋の扉封印されてる。
ただの施錠だわ。でもただの部屋よ。窓はあるけれどすでに封印されてるわ。つまり密室、私たちの棺桶ってわけ。
棺桶上等だわ。鍵を開けて。妬ましいわ。あんたにしか開けられないなんて。
Leviathan's stake flew about at high speeds, ramming itself into the keyhole to that room. The tip of the stake had become a key. As soon as it was unlocked, the door flew open. Both of them fell into the room and quickly locked it. This was probably Krause's study. Its soothing furnishings brought about a sense of nobility that Krause would probably like.
正常なんかしてもあいつ は扉を一撃で打ち砕けるわ。キリエは自分で自分の棺桶の蓋を閉じただけよ。
でもね、棺桶の中で私たちにとどめを食らわせたかったら蓋を開けなければならない。
With dim eyes, Jessica tilted her head upon hearing Kyrie's words.
何を言ってんの。その小さな部屋がどうしておばさんを守ってくれると。
確かにこの部屋は密室だわ。私たちの退路はない。でもね、あなただってこの部屋には侵入できないわよ。それが密室というもの。
何を言っている。そんなちっぽけな部屋のこんなちっぽけな扉一枚でどうして私から逃れたつもり。
Jessica wearily looked between her own burning fists and the door with a confused expression on her face. Then, slowly, she sent that pulsating red light to her fists. She repeatedly enhanced her fists to give them the destructive power for the killing blow.
こんな扉粉々にしてやる。
できるならね、やってごらんなさい。
After sealing the door and calmly saying those words, Kyrie placed a single index finger on the door. Jessica slowly raised her fire-wreathed demon's fists.
さよならキリエおばさん。
Oh, whoa. Jessica's fist slammed into the door in slow motion. Uh-oh, it was like the decisive scene in the movie was being acted out. Something's happening. However, this was no act. Jessica's fists really were slowing down as though they were being sucked in, like a spoon sinks through a jar of honey. That punch was no longer a punch. It was no more than a knock.
嫉妬するのよ、あなたに。私は恋に対する甘えと傲慢から18年嫉妬の地獄を張ったわ。だからあなたが妬ましいの。あなたは私の忠告を受けて恋を成就させて美しい人生を歩むでしょ。女の一番美しい時間、
I envy you.
あなたは私よりも18年も長く過ごせる。ああ、妬ましい。
Jessica tried to slam her fist against the door over and over again. However, as soon as her fist approached it, speed plummeted. She could barely knock, much less smash the door.
速度不要瞬発不要音速不要。
無駄よ、お嬢ちゃん。
砕けろ。
With full speed upgrades, Jessica's fist moved at the speed of sound, 1,225 kilometers per hour. However, how long had Jessica been in envy to gain that speed? She had started to envy George and Shannon's relationship about 2 years ago. Oh, math. 2 times 365 equals 730 days. 730 times 24 equals 17,520 hours. However, she wasn't envious all the time. It only happened when Shannon started going on about George, which Shannon's shift on about 3 days of the week, divided by 7 times 3. And it wasn't as though she would go on about George all day long. Her fond words for him would only leave a mark on Jessica for about an hour, right? So only 1/24 of each day. 17,520 divided by 7 times 3, or just 21, divided by 24 equals 312. Hey, order of operations, put your 7 times 3 into parentheses. Removing the fractional part. Number of hours that Kyrie had been jealous was 157,680. In other words, this wasn't even 0.2% of the time Kyrie had been jealous. Even 1,225 kilometers per hour, the speed of sound becomes only 2.45 kilometers per hour in the 1 in 500 world.
わかる？あなた恋も嫉妬も足りないわ。
You're not as envious as me. Even if she increased the speed of her fist, in Kyrie's world, Jessica couldn't make it any faster than a walking child. Jessica ground her teeth, her fist still pressed against the door. If someone who could have seen this room from both sides of the door, it would have looked as though Kyrie was holding it shut with a single finger. Whoa.
ねえ、この部屋は密室でしょ。ジェシカちゃんはせいぜいノックをすることはできるけど、中の私たちには指一本触れることはできない。
ベアトリーチェの密室邸です。
何そ
こうなるとこの密室ちと厄介ですが、密室殺人を行うのは人間には不可能。それが行えるのは魔法だけです。ジェシカ様が真に魔法を理解されない限り打ち破れますまい。
もはやジェシカちゃんに私を詰めることはできない。やがて時間は進み、私がいつまでも戻らないことに気づいた親族たちが屋敷を探し始めるの。そしてあなたは観測される。魔女も魔法も観測されたら消える。悪夢の時間はもう終わりよ、お嬢ちゃん。
おや、ジェシカがいきなり脱落なんてびっくりだよ。
どうか頑張って。愛しのカノンのためにも。
さあジェシカ、愛を信じてどうか奇跡を見せておくれ。
訂正するわ。時間の経過を待つ必要さえない。だってここに内線電話があるんだもん。もちろん断線なんかしてないわ。私はこの受話器を取る。これが私のチェックメイト。
構築完了。密室殺人。
おや、有効ですな。
浸透付与。打撃伝達。間接攻撃力付与。
Jessica's fist, which was pressed against the door, glowed red and then white hot. Oh. Jessica didn't even swing her fist. She just kept it pressed against the door. However, Jessica's murder extended within the closed room. Through the crack in the door, through the keyhole, burst the flames of hell. Jessica couldn't see what was happening inside the room. However, even here, on the other side of the door, she could tell that the flames of hell had swallowed the entire room. Kyrie's smoldering death throes could be heard from across the door. Jessica clearly heard as Kyrie danced a dance of death amidst the hellfire, fell to her knees, and slumped over to the floor. Slowly, Jessica tore her burning fist away from the door.
そんなに嫉妬の地獄が恋しいの。焼かれてろ。嫉妬の炎で永遠に。嫉妬から学ぶものもあるだろうぜ。だがそれは誇るもんじゃねえし、義務でもねえ。やっぱりあんたおごってたぜ、キリエおばさん。
お見事な密室殺人ですな。
後片付けを頼むぜ。やがて見つかる遺体が黒焦げじゃ あまりに申し訳がない。きれいにしてやってくれるか。
かしこまりました、お嬢様。
Renobe transformed into a gold butterfly and entered Cross's study through the keyhole. Then he had to cross his arms and think about how he should even start cleaning up Kiri's unrecognizable corpse in this room that had ended up as a burning hell. Jeez. Jessica finally let out the breath that she had been holding down in her chest. Her normal human glint finally returned to her eyes, and then she couldn't help but shudder at what she'd done. Even if it had just been a trial on the game board for the sake of her love.
悪魔ども、これでいいんだろう。
お見事です、ジェシカ。あなたの愛も本物だ。
George welcomed Jessica with a crisp applause. Bito timidly tried to join him, but Jessica yelled at her and she stopped.
ゲーム版の上の話じゃないか。そこまで悲しむことじゃない。
理屈じゃ分かってる。でもだからって心の整理がつくわけがねえだろ。お嬢様、カノン君、私君のことが好き。諦められないよ。だから示したよ、私の気持ち。私間違ってないよね。間違ってないよね。お嬢様。
As Jessica started to sob, Ganon held her quietly, and he realized that he would have to carry on the determination she had shown him.
何も間違ってないさ、君。そして人の心を残し苦しむことも間違ってない。僕はそういうことに対し少し君よりストイックだっただけの話さ。
誰もがジョージ様の境地に至れるわけではありません。しかしどうあれ、お嬢様はとにもかくにも試練を成し遂げられた。お見事です。その決意の強さ、敬服します。
そういうことであるな。ジョージもジェシカも見事やり遂げたことは同じだ。あっぱれであったぞ、ジェシカ。今の密室殺人、魔女のわらわも見惚れるなかなかのものであった。
Jessica had used magic to kill Kiri, who had holed up inside a closed room. In that instant, Jessica had constructed a closed room murder, had it acknowledged by the demons, and raised it to the level of magic.
これで2人の試練が完了だわ。
さあ、次は誰が挑戦を？
ベアトリーチェ様かしら？
いやいや、シャノンかもしれないよ。
ここはカノンの出番に違いないわ。
さあ、名乗り出てほしい。次は誰が試練を？
魔女がゲーム版の殺人に臆してどうするというのか。奥手も過ぎれば恋を殺すぞ。
さあ、次は
誰が恋の殺人を？
The three who remained looked at each other. If none of the others raised their hands in the next few seconds, they would raise their own hand. All three thought this at the same time. So, they all raised their hands at the same time. The ones they loved had already shown their determination. They had to carry on. I think it might be Beatrice. Canon would also be good. Canon. Bye.